Welcome to the Quarantine Star Mount Zion.
So I want to welcome everybody who's watching this. Today we get to have a really important conversation with the pastor, Carleathea Benson. Pastor Benson and I have gotten to know each other some over the last year or so that I've been at Mount Zion, and have enjoyed getting to know her and see her several times in worship, and just get to know each other through important conversations we've gotten to have. Pastor Benson is a longtime person who's been involved with ethnic local church concerns, and conversations about race. And so, Pastor Benson, I thank you for being part of today's conversation.
Thank you for inviting me, John.
And for anybody who's watching, this is actually our second try at this. We had some technical difficulties with our previous attempt. So at long last, I'm excited we get to have this conversation and share it. So I know, Pastor Benson, you, over the years before you were a pastor and in other parts of the state, you are from this area. You know a number of folks in this community, have participated in Bible study with others at Mount Zion. And so I just wanted to share, for those who might not know you, what are some of the important things that you think they should know about you and your interactions in Central and Mount Zion?
Well, I think they should know that I really love Mount Zion, and I participated in Bible studies there, vacation Bible study, and others that we've had over the years, with Doctors Ansel and Sharon Miller being hosts for it. And we've had such an awesome time together, a good time of growth, and I appreciate that. It also helped the two churches, Central and Mount Zion, to work together, which is a great thing, and which is needed in the church as a whole. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned those opportunities for growth. I think my prayer is that today's conversation can be part of that ongoing growth as we learn to understand race and how that impacts life for a lot of people. And so I thank you for being part of this conversation. I know at Mount Zion, we've had some conversations with our Bible study group and in other settings about race and racism. And one of two events that really put that on a lot of people's radar just a few months ago were the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd.
Right.
And I just wanted to hear from you. I know how those events touched me and how they have impacted others who I know. But when you saw those events back in May, what were some of your initial thoughts and reactions?
Oh, it was heart-wrenching. Not another life lost. And it was, I don't know, it stirs a lot of emotions, because if you lived as long as I have, you've seen a lot of folks lose their lives through the police and other means. It just was very disturbing to see a man who was down, who really hadn't done anything, but he's down on the ground, and the policeman has his knee on his neck, and he says, they said at least 28 times, that he couldn't breathe. You have other officers there, and they don't intervene, because the person that has him down is their senior. And to hear somebody say that they can't breathe and then call on the name of their dead mother, my Lord, it was very, very disturbing. And it's not the first time. Prayerfully, it will be the last time But I know there have been some incidences since, but not to that degree of that one. But it has to stop. It has to not be that. We're all God's children. And that's one of the things that I always try to make known to folks. We come from one seed. And from that one seed, God created us all. So why is it that we can't get along? And why is it we can't love? Because Christ is about love. And that's who we say we love, and that's who we're going to serve. But we can't do that if we don't practice what we say we believe. Now, I'm not saying that all those folks that have done this are believers. They may not be. And I just pray for them. But it was highly disturbing because, we've seen it so many times.
And you touch on, it may be that the people who have perpetrated some of these events were not, maybe they weren't Christians, but there's still a role for Christians to play.
Exactly.
In fighting this. Something I was curious about is I read in the days after George Floyd's death, a black writer who was saying, as protests started to emerge, was saying a lot of white people think this is just about George Floyd.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm still doing this because of Emmett Till.
Right.
And this idea that a lot of white people just saw this atrocity committed against George Floyd, but that this brings back memories of so many other events for others.
That's true. That's very true. And, Black history is not a part of our curriculum. Okay, so without knowing Black history, it's hard for people to identify or to say, I understand how someone feels that has been persecuted or that has been handed down through the years racist things in their lives. It's hard for me to sort of articulate that, but what I'm saying is this: with Emmett Till was a young youth, black guy, who, because they said he looked at a white woman, they took him, they lynched him, they put his body in water. And that's the reason when you see the scenes that his mother allowed to be seen when they opened the coffin, he was all swollen. Didn't even look like himself. And it was because somebody said that. Some white person said it against him, and they took it and ran with it. In the Old South, when I was growing up, I shared with you that there were times when I remember my mama talking to me about when they were going to church at Abel Baptist Church, which is up part of Clemson, going towards Central. And I would go to Golden View, which is just down in Clemson, which was Calhoun at the time, the black section called Calhoun. And as they would walk to church, a truck would come by, or a car would come by with white nails in it, on it, and they would take their urine in a jar and pour it on them, just for the fun of it. There were times when my mother would tell me about where folks would say that a black person did something, and white males, if it was a male, cut off his finger, one of the fingers, and wear it on their belt to show them, you better stay in your place, because this is what will happen if you don't. It's one of those things to grow up and to be a part of something where even after I got married in the 70s, mid-70s, closer to the 80s, we had a basketball team at Tri-County Tech, where I worked. And on the way down toward the low part of the state, we stopped at a little country store, little tiny country store on the side of the road. And when we went in, the basketball team was coached by Jim Longo, retired chief of police from New York City, and I kept the stats, so that's why I went. And the team was predominantly black. I think we had maybe 3 or 4 white players on the team. So we were going, and they wanted something to eat, to drink, that kind of thing. And we stopped at this little store, and when we got out and we went in, I felt uncomfortable. I really felt very uncomfortable. And they started looking around to see what they could purchase. There were 2 pool tables in the room, and the white men were standing around and playing pool. Well, I needed to go to the restroom, so I asked, and they told me where it was, the clerk at the counter. I went to the restroom, and feeling uncomfortable, I even put my foot up on the door because I just didn't feel right. When I walked out, the men were standing around the wall. Coach Longo had said to all, if you haven't purchased it, put it down and let's go. Put it down now and let's go. I didn't purchase anything because I just walked out. We left and we got on the bus and we left to go and left this place and went to play the game. But that stays in my mind. It stays in my mind because we didn't do anything. And before we left, the thing that I mentioned to you last time, there's a song that they put on the jukebox when they went around the wall, and it is we will rock you. And then they took their pool sticks and hit them on the floor to rock you. And anytime I hear it when it's played at a football game, basketball game, I don't care where, it brings back that memory. So there are a lot of instances. I remember Wade Campbell, who was the sheriff for Pickens County back in the 50s. And Wade Campbell, if somebody called and said there was a shooting in a black community, he didn't come. He waited. He waited because he was hoping that somebody would kill off somebody. And late about dusk, he would show up. And, he didn't do anything to help us. He only did things that persecuted us. And so when you have memories like that, and you know that it's the truth, and even later in the 90s, the mid-90s, I had a pastor friend who was going home back to Mississippi. And he said that he was driving along the road and this police car got behind him. He wasn't speeding, he wasn't doing anything wrong, and they followed him and followed him and followed him. Finally, they pulled him over. And when they pulled him over, he asked, what did he do wrong? And they wanted him to get in their car, and he said no. And he turned around and he asked again, what did I do wrong? And they couldn't give him an answer. So they let him go after everything was said and done. They let him go. They followed him again for a good distance. And he said he felt like he was going to die that day. When you hear those stories, when you've done nothing wrong, and all it is because the color of your skin, it hurts.
Appreciate you revisiting that pain to share with others. I know the story you mentioned about your clergy friend, that's almost identical to Brian Stevenson, who's featured in the movie Just Mercy, and an experience that he had very similar to that in the late 80s.
Right.
So this isn't back in the 50s or 60s.
Right.
We're talking about. Thank you to Pastor Benson for that part of the conversation today. The next 2 weeks, we'll have 2 more parts of our conversation, so I invite you to tune in. Until next time, we'll see you.